recently Death Battle just dropped Perfect Cell vs Metal Sonic, and needless to say, this was very expected for Dragon Ball to lose because that's the most common trope that Death Battle loves to appeal to, having Dragon Ball characters losing. A little while ago, I predicted that this Death Battle would suck because they never give us the respect we deserve as Dragon Ball fans when we actually present facts and evidence. However, one position that Death Battle did get correct was that Cell was faster than Metal Sonic, but not for the right reasons. So for this video, I have two goals. One, it's to prove that Death Battle was wrong and that Metal Sonic has no win conditions to beat Cell, and to give clarity to my previous video because a lot of the people in the comments did not understand any of my arguments whatsoever. And to those people, if you disagree with my takes on Dragon Ball or just any take regarding power scaling, please come debate me. I've already said multiple times that my Discord server is in my bio. I am not reading your comments. Just go debate me directly if you disagree. You're just wasting your time and not getting a single response. For this video, I'm going to be collabing with my boy Trick, as it's a pleasure to have him on the channel. We'll be in charge of dividing this video into two sections, one of them being the Cell scale and the other one being refuting every single Metal Sonic win con to ever exist. Let's go to Perfect Cell. On to you, Trick.
So firstly, Frieza blatantly scales to Universal as way back in the Namek Saga. It's stated multiple times that just in his second form, he's able to destroy the entirety of the living universe, as well as his existence being an active threat to it. And no, this isn't in reference of him just wanting to conquer it, because Frieza now has the power to destroy the universe, which implies that in his first form he couldn't, and between transformations it's his physical power that's changing, not his military power. If it was his second form that gave him the ability to conquer it, he'd always be in it. But prior to the Namek Saga, that's obviously not the case, as in non-combat situations he's always in his first form. This is also not an overtime feat, as the language that's being used is that he wields enough power to destroy the universe, meaning that in his second form, he carries sufficient dormant power to annihilate the universe, and that isn't something he needs to recuperate his strength for. We can take this even further, as in his final form, the narrator states that his battle power was now of a different dimension, which contextually speaking would be higher dimensional, as if it was just some alternate dimension, the narrator would be asserting that his power is coming from somewhere else, even though that's his own dormant power. As for Cell, reaching his perfect form puts him at a tier of power that's completely immeasurable in comparison to the Z-Fighters prior to the 10 Days of Peace. This is corroborated by the fact that Trunks, who at this point in time is way stronger than Goku on Namek, can't even do as much as make Cell budge. It's even stated that Perfect Cell had reached a battle power of infinity, which is consistent as Toriyama himself confirmed that after the events of the Namek Saga, characters reach battle powers that are no longer numerically measurable, making it consistent that Perfect Cell had reached a battle power of literal infinity. Knowing that final form Frieza with the finite battle power was 4D, Cell, who's infinite in comparison to that, would have infinite 4D or multiversal plus attack potency. You could possibly take this even further, as final form Frieza shows that finite increases in power level can make your attack potency increase in entire dimensions, and an infinite power level which is equal to an infinite amount of finite jumps to entail infinite dimensional attack potency. But for the sake of the argument, we'll just presuppose that he's only multiversal plus attack potency wise. As for speed, it's pretty simple. Cell having at least infinite power would mean he has infinite speed due to the attack potency speed correlation in Dragon Ball. We also know that Ki lets the user transcend their physical limitations, and it's used to amplify both speed and strength, so a being with infinite Ki output would be able to amplify their speed infinitely. And for Cell's abilities, he has all of the Z-Fighters techniques, Piccolo's regeneration, Frieza and King Cold's potential, and grows a great amount near death like Saiyans. And he even gains the abilities of his opponents if pushed near death, as seen with Cell learning instant transmission from self-destruction. So in conclusion, Perfect Cell has all of this with multiversal plus attack potency and infinite speed at a bare minimum, with higher end interpretations getting him all the way to high hyperversal.
thanks to Death Battle, the scaling for Perfect Cell is not limited to a single continuity, as they use the movies, etc, etc. Meaning whether or not you believe or don't believe these series are connected to the main timeline of Dragon Ball, it doesn't matter. Which means I can use Cell from Dragon Ball GT, and you know how this goes. In Dragon Ball GT, Cell is able to scale to base GT Goku, as he was able to temporarily absorb him. This is important because GT Goku destroyed the Sugoroku space in his base form with a Kamehameha, the same Sugoroku space which is stated to have no time or space. This is backed up by the narrator consistently, and is backed up by the fact that one of the death gods who has authority over the space points out how Goku would be trapped forever. In order for this to be possible, it must be the case that Goku cannot physically age, which requires time. If he could physically age, that must mean that he would eventually die of age, which would mean he wouldn't be trapped there forever. And having no time or space would also mean lacking the restrictions of time and space, which is Outerversal by definition, as even infinite dimensional constructs necessarily need to have the restrictions of time and space, which include spatial extension and temporal duration. Even more consistency backing that the Sugoroku space is Outerversal is that it's described as a similar example to the quote-unquote subspace category, which is described as lacking the concepts of time and space, and is separate from every area, which is inclusive of spatial dimensionality. So using Dragon Ball content outside of the main manga continuity is not looking good, because it just gives Cell Outerversal attack potency with irrelevant speed, which is something Metal Sonic cannot hope to ever achieve.
You fell right into my trap. I've done it! I've trapped him inside me and there's nothing he can do! The strength I've absorbed from Goku is almost overwhelming. I could accomplish anything with this power. Huh?
That was a close one. Through solid ice. That's just how good he is. I wouldn't say that. I just like to know my enemy's weaknesses. And I know this thing will work a lot better on you than it did on me.
What are you doing? You in the ball?
You'd think these guys would have learned their lesson after all their time here. It's really too bad. Oh man, sorry about that.
Now, how does Metal Sonic hold up against this? Well, yeah, it's not fair. He doesn't match any of this. Now let's dive into every single counter argument that we can provide against every single Metal Sonic argument in his favor. The main argument is that Metal Sonic can just copy Cell's DNA or his biodata and he would win via this ability. This argument doesn't logically follow because Metal Sonic is not a living being, and to even have ki in the first place, you must be a living organism. And you also must be able to copy a spiritual metaphysical energy on top of this requirement. Now let's go over Metal Sonic's actual copying ability and what it is. is. What Metal Sonic does is that he copies one's biodata, which is essentially one's biology, and he does it in the way of mimicking abilities. For example, a chameleon can camouflage, so if I'm Metal Sonic, that means that I have the ability to camouflage using this ability. However, we must understand that there is a distinction between biological abilities and actual biology. Metal Sonic cannot literally copy your biology one-to-one, especially when we consider that he's an artificial robot, so he's not a living being, meaning he cannot literally have biology. It's the same way a plane can fly just like birds can, but it's not an actual living being, it's just a vehicle. It is basically just copying abilities that are intrinsic to one's biology, but not the biology itself. Cell. So now let's get into the other scaling that people want to argue for Metal Sonic and why it fails. People try to argue that Metal is above Solaris, and Solaris is a super-dimensional being, so therefore Metal Sonic has super-dimensional power. Super-dimensional power is higher dimensional, so therefore Metal Sonic would be somewhere around the lines of these multiversal, low-complex multiversal ranges of power. But this argument fails because it severely ignores context. Solaris is a super-dimensional being, yes. However, Sonic does not scale to the super-dimensional essence of Solaris. This is because the story contextualizes that Solaris had been dimensionally anchored or maintained, meaning he's not actually super dimensional, but rather that his existence is now maintained or limited to 3D reality. We know this is talking about dimensionality because a higher dimensional being cannot exist or operate within a lower dimensional 3D reality, because they are infinitely more complex spatially with higher degrees of freedom than that said reality, making them inaccessible. And the place Solaris and Sonic are fighting in is a three-dimensional reality because it's basically just a time-space nexus of the universe.
Much longer.
We've no time to waste. We've got to defeat it now!
No, it is a transcendent life form that exists in the past, present, and future. Defeating it here, now, would do nothing.
No, I won't give up. There has to be a way. If you say it exists in the past, present, and future, I'll destroy them all at once!
Certainly. It might have been possible if he was still alive.
もたもた知らねえぜ! 早く奴を倒さないと!
いや、奴は過去、現在、未来、同時に存在する。いわば超次元生命体だ。今ここで倒せたとしても、何の意味もなさん。
いや、俺は絶対に諦めない。奴が過去、現在、未来に存在するってんなら、そいつらをまとめて滅ぼしてやる。
確かにできたかもしれない。彼がまだ生きていればな。
Infinite is stronger than Solaris because of this famous statement right here, but this argument is so bad because this could literally just be dismissed as promotional marketing hype for Sonic Forces and not to actually reflect a fact about the narrative. It could literally just be promotional exaggeration, which is something that advertisements are known to do. So Sonic fans, please stop using this garbage promotional argument. This even happens in Dragon Ball 2. There's even promotional statements of Goku and Gohan being the strongest father-son duo despite the fact that the Grand Priest and Whis exist. The next argument to scale Metal Sonic high is by trying to argue that Metal Sonic scales to the Arabian Nights, which have a bunch of universes or thousands of universes. But this claim is not backed up anywhere. In fact, it's the exact opposite because the Arabian Nights is just one world split into multiple and can be perceived from one another, meaning that these are not separate spacetimes and these are most certainly not infinite. So no, the Arabian Nights scaling is not anywhere near multiversal. I've also seen people try to back up that these are multiple universes because they have multiple stories or that they function off of different physics. But this doesn't logically follow because even our own world has plenty of non-fiction stories. That doesn't mean those stories operate under different spacetimes. This argument is so stupid. And the physics point also doesn't help their case because there are many planets contained within the universe that operate under different physics. For example, there is a difference between Earth and Jupiter's gravity being much different from each other. And both of these planets exist within the same space-time continuum. So no, distinction in physics does not equal spatio-temporal distinction. People try to argue that Metal Sonic scales to infinite and infinite created the null space, and the null space is a place that is stated to be separate from every dimension. This would be inclusive of spatial dimensionality, so therefore Metal Sonic is Outerversal. This argument doesn't logically follow because it's pre-assuming the word dimension is directly tied to spatial dimensionality or every and all examples of something that could be accounted as a dimension. It can just mean that it's separate from every single universe or every single timeline. It does not have to be an index to spatial dimensionality. People try to prove the context is talking about spatial dimensionality because it uses the kanji jigen, but Japanese translations don't dismiss semantical ambiguity and they could use the word jigen to express a universe or just another timeline. So this literally attacks nothing.
Super